We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 47a. On the previous summit, the Gemara is addressing the line in the Mishnah which says if the para gores a shore, and then after the goring we find a vlad, we find a baby of the para at the side, we don't know if it gored when it was pregnant or if it gored already when it had already had the baby. So we don't know if you can pay from the vlad or not. So it said in the Mishnah that you pay chatzi nezek from the para, and you pay a revia, you pay a quarter of the damages from the vlad. And the Gemara had asked, that doesn't make any sense. The most you should be paying is chatzi nezek, because we're talking about a tam. So why over here you're paying chatzi nezek plus revia? That sounds like you're paying 75%. And so the Gemara is now in the middle of Rava's explanation of the Mishnah, and Rava explains what it really means is as follows. If the para is around, so then of course you pay chatzi nezek from the para. There's no question. You don't have to worry about the vlad. However, the Mishnah is then saying less of the para, but let's say there is no para around. And we know that when we pay from a tam, you pay from the animal itself. So now you have to pay only from the vlad, but we don't even know if the vlad was involved. So then the Mishnah is saying, Mishtalim revia nezek mi vlad. So you just pay a quarter of the damages from the vlad. That's Rava's explanation of the Mishnah. But the Gemara says, Taima de lo yadina. Now, according to Rava's explanation, the only reason why you're paying a quarter from the vlad and not the full chatzi nezek is because we don't know. We have a vlad bahada kinocha. If the animal was still pregnant with the vlad at the time of the goring, ilohav, or if it was not around, if it wasn't present, so since you don't know if the vlad, so to speak, is responsible, so you don't take the full chatzi nezek from the vlad, you only take a quarter. Avoli pshita lon to have a vlad bahada kinagcha, but let's say it was obvious to us. Let's say we knew 100% that the vlad, the animal, was pregnant at the time of the goring, and then again the animal, the par is not around, so you're paying from the vlad. So apparently mishtalim kule chatzi nezek mi vlad, the entire chatzi nezek would be paid from the vlad. That's the implication of Rava's understanding of the Mishnah. And so the Gemara now explains Rava l'taime. Rava is actually following his general opinion. The Yamar Rava, because Rava says para shehizika, that if a cow does damage, gova mivalda, you are able to collect the damages from the vlad, from the child in such a situation, and that's what would happen over here. Again, here it's a suffix, so we don't collect the entire chatzi nezek from the vlad, but in theory you could collect the entire chatzi nezek from the vlad. And the Gemara says, my time, well, what's the reason of Rava? Why is it that you can collect from the vlad? The Gemara says, gufahi, the Gemara says it's considered to be like part of its body, it's considered to be part of the animal, and that's why you do in fact collect from the vlad as well. However, Rava makes the following distinction. Tarnagolas shehizika, let's say you have a chicken that causes damage, Eino gova mi beitzasa, you're not able to collect the damages from the egg of the chicken. My time, what's the reason? Pirsha bialmahu, it's just considered to be something that is a separate entity. It's not really part of the body of the chicken, and therefore you do not pay from the egg. Rashi says, Pirsha davar hamufresh mimene, it's something that is separated from it. So Rava makes this distinction between the vlad and the beitza, between the child and the egg, and that's again what Rava is saying over here as well. He's using that same logic. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Rav, and Rava says, Ein shaman lepara b'fnei atzma v'levlad b'fnei atzma. We don't do an evaluation of the para by itself or the vlad by itself. El shaman levlad al gav para. Rather, when we do an evaluation, this is in terms of, let's say, the para was damaged. You have to evaluate the entire animal, the para together with the vlad. Shima ta omerken, because if you don't do that, nimsa ta machish as hamazik, you're going to end up weakening the position of the mazik. What we're essentially saying over here is, let's say you do have a situation where a para is damaged and the para is pregnant. How do you evaluate the damages? Do you evaluate the damage, what's the loss of the para and what's the loss of the vlad, and add them together? Rav is saying you do not do that. What you do instead is you evaluate the what is the value in general of a pregnant animal. As Rashi explains, Ein shaman areshaklai. First of all, we're going on the first part of the Mishnah now. We're going back to the first part of the Mishnah of shor shenogach etzapara, again where the ox is the one that's doing damage to the pregnant para, v'hipila, and then it causes a miscarriage. So Ein shaman kalecha b'fnei atzma. We don't say let's evaluate the value of the para by itself and let's evaluate the value of the vlad by itself. Sha'olim d'mei hanezek harbe, because then the amount of damages is going to be a lot. That's what we mean to say you're weakening the position of the mazik. The mazik is going to lose money then. Aval shaman para mu'beres kama haisa yafet chila. What we do is we say as follows. Let's say the shore caused a miscarriage, so you just evaluate the para when you have a pregnant para. What is it worth when it's pregnant? V'kama hi shavach, and what is it now worth in meisim chay? Whatever the case is, if it dies, if it's alive, what's the difference in the value of the para mu'beres? So the para mu'beres was worth a certain amount of money, and then of course there's a loss of money after the goring. That's how you should do the evaluation. Again, machish is mafsid. The idea is machish is you're weakening. He's going to lose out. He's going to lose too much money. Well, now the Gemara will ask later on, idinu, but if that is the halacha lichosh, let him lose the money. Why is that a problem? The Gemara will explain. And the Gemara continues, Rava continues along the same lines. You're going to apply the same principle. Let's say you have a situation where a person cuts off the hand of the eved of his friend. And the same is true, let's say a person does damage to the field of his friend. Those damages are all evaluated as a whole, not independently, or else it's going to be too much of a loss for the mazik. Rashi explains, somebody cuts off the hand of the eved of his friend. You don't say, what is the value of a hand? How much would a person want to take that the hand of this eved is going to cut off? Because certainly if somebody has an eved, and the eved is a whole eved, there's nothing wrong with the eved, no one's going to say, cut off my eved's hand, unless he's going to get a lot of money in return. That's going to be a great amount of evaluation, a great amount of damage. So you don't do the evaluation that way, because then the person who caused the damage would be paying a lot of money. You just evaluate what was the eved worth when he had a hand, and what is the eved worth when he doesn't. What's he worth now without a hand? What was he worth before? Same idea by hamazik sadachaver. Same thing if you damage the field of a person. So then you're not going to evaluate each fruit that was damaged. You evaluate the field as a whole. Kotzes nitiyosef, again, the person cuts off these trees. Awachal aruga achas, or let's say there's a certain patch of the area that was eaten. Ein shaman osalavadi. You don't just say we're evaluating that produce that was damaged on its own. Elashaman beisa ba'osasad. But rather you take a beisa, you take a larger amount of the whole field, and you say, how much was this whole field worth first? And now that this little patch was damaged, how much did the entire field go down in value? And that's how you evaluate how much the mazik should pay. But the Gemara continues, Ravacha the son of Rava said to Ravashi, this is the question that Rashi alluded to before, but if that is the proper halach, if that is the amount of the damage, lechosh mazik, let the mazik lose out. Why are we saying that we don't want the mazik to lose if that's actually the damage that was caused? And the Gemara explains, Mishum do'amar le, no, the reason is because he says to him, Parama barta aziksach, Parama barta shaimina lach. It was a pregnant cow that I damaged, that's what the evaluation should do. Essentially, the Gemara is saying, this is the proper way to really evaluate the damage. And the Gemara continues, Pshita, it is obvious, para dechad uvlad dechad. Let's say you have a situation where one person owns the para and one person owns the vlad, one person owns the child. Pitma lebal para. So then the pitma means to say what it was, the fattening, so to speak, goes to the owner of the cow. Rashi explains, Pituma masha shaman osa shahaisa yafim ibnei shomna have debal para. Let's say you're evaluating it and you say because of the fact that it's a larger animal, it's a fatter animal, that goes to the owner of the cow. The point is that a para does not become fat because of a vlad. In other words, you're trying to evaluate, let's say this animal is damaged, you want to know how much is the para worth, how much is the vlad worth. So let's say you have the fat of the animal. Is that really a consequence of the vlad, or is that a consequence of the para? We say that is not a consequence of the vlad. That part belongs to the baal para, belongs to the owner of the cow itself. But the question is nafchamai. The question is, what about in terms of the swelling of the animal? Maybe that is due to the vlad. Maybe that's due to the child. Rashi says nafchamai masha haisa yafim nafcha lemi yishalim. Who are you going to pay? Let's say it's worth a little more because of the fact that it is swelled up. So that maybe really is because of the vlad. So maybe that should be paid to the owner of the vlad. And when the Gemara here refers to nafcha, the simple explanation is that the cow's appearance, it's actually worth more when it's pregnant because of the way it appears, because of the way it looks. So that added value in terms of its appearance, again, who does that belong to? Does that belong to the Baal Para, or does that belong to the Baal Vlad? And the Gemara says, Rapapa says, Labal Para, that goes also to the Baal Para, to the owner of the cow. But Ravacha Breder Ravika, Amar Ravacha, the son of Ravika, he says, Amar Cholkin, he says, Cholkin, that you actually divide that. V'hilchasan, that is the halacha Cholkin, that we actually divide up that value in terms of the nafcha, in terms of the bulk that is added, so to speak, to the para. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hakader shehichnes k'dei rosav l'chatzer balabayas shalo b'rishos. If the potter brings his pots into the courtyard of the balabayas, he does not have permission to bring his kedeiros there. V'shavra behemto shel balabayas, and then the animal of the balabayas breaks the pots. Potter, so the owner of the animal is potter because the kadr came in there without any permission. Vim huzka behen, and let's say the animal is damaged from the pots, bal hakadeiros chayev, the owner of the pots is going to be chayev because again he was in there without permission. Vim hechnes bereshus, however, let's say he entered and he did have the permission of the balabayas, of the balachotzer, so balachotzer chayev. So in that case, the owner of the chotzer is the one that is going to be chayev for any damage that his animal does to the pots. Similarly, hichnas peiros of l'chatzar balabayis. Let's say a person brings his fruits into the courtyard of the balabayis, shelo b'rishus, again without permission. V'acholton behemto shel balabayis. If the animal of the balabayis eats the fruits, potter, the balabayis is potter because the person entered without permission. V'im huzko behen bal hapeiros chayiv. And if the animal is damaged from the fruits, the owner of the peiros is chayiv because again he was there without permission. V'im hichnas b'rishus. But again, if he enters with the permission of the bal chatzar, so then bal chatzar chayiv. Then the owner of the chatzar is going to be chayiv. Hichnes shoro l'chatzar balabayis shelo. Let's say a person enters his ox into the chatzar, the balabayis, again without permission, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis.